And, this is one of the reasons that I've been a client of yours for a number of years, is that I would say I'm trying to learn or even have a better relationship with aspects of myself that I didn't know, or aspects of myself that I don't particularly like.
Well, the truth is, Matt, that you're one of a very few people who is alive because of some sort of circumstance that should have you dead.
Mm.
And I don't know, are you comfortable with my sharing?
Yeah, there are no shared secrets here. For those who don't know, again, I've been a client of Dr. Neil's for a number of years, and there have been some pretty serious suicide attempts, as you would say, Dr. Neil, a 10 on a scale of 10, or even an 11 on a scale of 10 in terms of the seriousness of a suicide attempt on my behalf. I'm fortunate enough that I certainly did survive. The hero story continues, and I'm fortunate to have learned people such as yourself, who I like to consider on my team, because I don't believe we can go it alone in today's society, and we need people such as yourself who don't have a vested interest or a biased viewpoint, such as maybe a family member or a friend may have. You're completely unbiased, and as again you had said, the job of your soul is to make sure that my soul is going to be doing the best that it can.
Mhm. Well, the truth is that suicide, as is commonly said in my business, is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
I love that. I have
Yep.
to say I've incorporated that into my own viewpoint now.
Good. But the reality is that you shouldn't be alive.
Mm.
The reality is that you took a loaded gun and pointed it at your heart and pulled the trigger. That is an 11 on a scale of 10 of trying to end your life. The fact that you survived is more the result of your not knowing where your heart was.
I missed everything.
Yeah. And since then, we've been working on your understanding why it is that you're still alive,
Mm.
and what raison d'etre, what reason to be you can come up with that will work for you and allow you to take full advantage of the fact that you shouldn't be alive but still are.
And to again pull that back into our topic here today, would it be a safe statement to say that I lost sight of that statement, that I am the most important person in the world to me at that time, and that led to that action? I'm, again, as we say, it's an 11 on a scale of 10, and I know for myself, I was in what I would term the tunnel of darkness. And for those who have maybe walked in that tunnel or ridden in that tunnel, they may very much understand what I'm speaking about, that it's very much tunnel vision, and the peripheral is gone. It's very, very tunnel-like. And so as we bring it back to our topic, I would say that, perhaps I lost sight of that in that tunnel of darkness.
Yes, yes. I believe that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that you were in a rage.
Mm,
One part of you was trying to kill another part of you.
mm,
And those two parts were not talking to each other. And I think those two parts are communicating with each other now, although they wouldn't be and shouldn't be if it hadn't been for the pure chance of your missing your shot.
mm, mm, yeah. And, to that end, I was not under your care at that time. I was very much in an isolation, in my own bubble, or again in my own tunnel of darkness. And I remember, what was going. I remember what was going through my head at the time, that I didn't want to be a burden to anybody. So, not being under your care, and not or under the care of a professional such as yourself. So I didn't have that ability for circumspection, if you will.
Yeah, yeah, I think that tunnel vision is not a bad concept there, but to understand that there are parts of me that feel like they deserve to be shot. There are parts of me that feel like shooting those parts of me.
Mm,
And until I can totally empathize with both parts, until I can, for want of another word, love the
mm,
part of me that that is both in a rage and both feels like I deserve to die, until I can uh, get that. Sometimes it's referred to as radical acceptance.
right.
Yeah. But loving someone means wanting what's best for them, even if it's not what's best for you. And if you really love somebody, you accept the fact that they deserve to live, and the issue is what's best for them.
Mm,
Uh, and the reality is that what was best for the part of you that wanted to kill the part of you that wanted to, that was provoking it, that what was actually best was for there to be pure empathy,
mm,
for one part to be inside the mind of the other part, and for them to join. And the person who did the most work on this was a guy named Carl Rogers, uh, whose concept was what's currently thought of as active listening.
mm,
I remember getting totally infuriated myself at watching a video of Carl Rogers talking to someone who was suicidal. And the person who was suicidal was saying, there's no reason for me to live. Nobody understands me. Nobody listens to me. Nobody pays any attention to me. I might as well be dead. And Carl Rogers was saying, it seems like nobody ever hears you. It seems like whatever you say, there's never anybody to pay attention to you. And after watching, half an hour of this, I wanted to get up and grab the guy and say, Rogers is listening to you. Can't you see that? But by the end of the video, the guy had decided not to kill himself.
mm,
And the only thing Rogers did was reflect back what he was saying.
mm.
Rogers, in
Well,
other words, became the part of him that needed to listen to him.
and I think that you hit on, a word there that I think is really key to this subject, and that is the radical acceptance of self.
Mhm.
If you are the most important person in the world to you, you that is only true if you radically accept every part of your personality, especially those that you're not happy with or you don't like, um, and whatnot.
That's exactly right. In fact, uh, most of the parts of ourselves that we don't like come from other people.
Hmm.
When you're a child and you're getting yelled at or being brought up by somebody, the issue of it's no fun being yourself and you don't have any power. You're basically traumatized. You're trapped, helpless, powerless, perhaps petrified with fear. No fun being yourself. Might as well become the person who's yelling at you.
Mm,
That's why during the Second World War, there were some Jews walking around goose stepping and acting like Germans.
mm,
There was no power in being a Jew at Auschwitz. At the same time, the concept of identification with the aggressor, which was later interpreted as the Stockholm syndrome,
Stockholm syndrome. Thank you. I was
that
searching for that word.
yeah, it's that basic idea that you incorporate uh, the the enemy's state of mind
Mm,
into yourself, and the result is that you hate yourself.
mm.
And most people don't understand that the opposite of love is not hate; it's indifference.
And it's so interesting as we dive deeper and deeper in here. I certainly can identify where this separation for me occurred, and it was about 8 years old when I
Mhm.
was terrorized by my sadistic sister,
Mhm.
um, who took great glee in traumatizing me, and at one point identifying with her aggression, which has led to years of self-loathing.
Mhm. Yes, and 8 years old is a very interesting age, because developmentally Piaget showed that that's the age at which you can get inside the perception of another person. It's a very limited perception, but a 7-year-old, if placed in front of a paper mache mountain range and a doll placed at the other side of the mountain range, if the 7-year-old is asked, what does the doll see? The 7-year-old will choose what he or she sees. An 8-year-old can choose what the doll would see. And so there's an actual change of perception that takes place between 7 and 8. Now, when I was 8 years old, I was so furious with my mother that I locked myself in the bathroom and had figured out how I was going to kill myself. And I had razor blades there and all the rest of that. And my mother was so terrified that she called my father, who was my model for what a good daddy should be. And he started asking me questions. And I said, I can't wait to see her face after I'm dead. And he said, well, how are you going to do that? That's why I didn't kill myself when I was 8 years old.
So, as we wrap up here, would you say that you're trying to, for the last, let's say, 60 years, carry on the work of your father, perhaps?
To a great degree. And maybe if I've done it right, in some areas I can do a little better than he did. The last year of his life, my father ate himself to death. He gained 100 pounds. I've had to work very hard on keeping from being substantially overweight and trying to not make the mistake my father made. And by the way, my best friend did the same thing some 40 years after that. Has been very difficult because understanding I come from a background that's half Jewish and half Italian. And if you want screwed up attitudes towards food, just check those cultures out.
As I speak with you, what really helps in my interaction with you is to recognize that whilst I may put you on a pedestal as the good daddy, quote unquote, to use your words, that you also are not infallible, that you struggle with weight issues. I struggle with weight issues. So to know that you struggle with it as well, 30 years or 50 years, or excuse me, 20 years older than myself, and have also had, thoughts of self-harm. It shows your humanity to me and puts it in a more real context so that it becomes, so good mental health becomes more attainable for me. Does that make sense?
Of course, we're both just guys doing the best we can to improve ourselves. And you've made quite a lot of progress, and hopefully I have too. But if there's ever somebody that I can't get inside their minds, that's a challenge to me, and I'll keep working on it because I love the puzzle of understanding how someone else thinks.
So our topic again is I am the most important person in the world to myself. Do you have final thoughts on that topic, Neil?
Well, the most important person I can be to myself is someone who understands other people and helps them to be more important to themselves. If I'm doing that, I'm doing my job right, and it gives me a rush. Anything else, I'm probably being selfish. And selfish to me means being able to help other people. There's nothing wrong with being selfish if you're helping other people. On the other hand, if you're out for yourself at the expense of other people, you're playing around with either crazy or evil. Crazy is doing something that hurts others or yourself, and you're not aware of it. Evil is doing something that makes yourself feel better at someone else's expense and no. Yeah, the thing that I think that our viewers would both like to hear, though, is what your perception is of what actually happened during your suicide attempt, both to you and your father, and what your perceptions are after that, because that has given some meaning to your life.
Well, I certainly look back at that time, and and you and I've spoken at length about it, of course, and certainly on this podcast series as well, that, I was going through probably one of the most difficult times of my life. I personally, having spoken with an astrologer, ascribe it to an astrological transit. Now, I know that you have some problems with that, but that's how I've been able to compartmentalize it, if I will, and put it into a context that is something I can move beyond.
Yeah, I have
And
no
so
problem with the power of a belief system. Whether I agree with it or not isn't the issue. The issue is, does it in fact help a person to grow or shrivel?
right, yeah, and his advice helped me put this into a context so that I could examine it with you and with others in a more dispassionate analysis. And so again, I was going through what I call the tunnel of darkness. And that, I think when you're in that period, you become very myopic. Again, you're in a tunnel of darkness. So this peripheral vision is gone and you're very, very focused on one thing. And so you can't see a lot outside of it. And so being in that tunnel of darkness, it took me to this place where, again, I was focused on not being a burden, not wanting to be a burden to people. And when the event itself occurred, there was a time distortion in my mind and in my brain.
Yeah, it was
and I look at it today and I still see that time distortion and how
when you were a teenager.
Right, exactly. And again, you and I have talked about how the lighting that night even was completely different. So I was in a very different time awareness at that time, because again, I was in the tunnel of darkness. And when you and I have spoken again at length about it afterwards, again, there was this time distortion that went on, and in a way, I look at it.
And your father, it sounds like.
I'm sorry?
For both you and your father.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get to, is that as much as there was a time distortion for me, my father was strangely roped into it as well. And it was sort of reliving a traumatic period between him and I in my life that happened at the age of 17, and it was like literally recreating it. And so what's
time when he really blew up at you,
right,
a 17-year-old who came home late from being out, and he waited for you. And in his mind, it sounded like he was feeling like if he didn't really come down on you when you were in your 50s for staying out late, that he would be a coward like he had been when he ran away from the guns.
And so what's so interesting is, through the work that you and I have done, to be able to reframe that event. And it's so interesting to think that, when that incident occurred at 17, the way that it transpired would sort of set up the incident, 35 years later to actually be recreated, to have a better ending to it, to have a better outcome, if you will. So for as an example, the incident that happened at 17 between my father and I was a seminal event that was a separation for us. As a matter of fact, the day after that, he and my mother separated and, eventually divorced, and he moved out of the house, that day afterwards. So 35 years later, to actually have that same event recreated gave both of us an opportunity to have a better outcome. And I can tell this to the listeners that for the 5 years after my incident, this occurred in July of 2014, my father passed in July of 2019, almost 5 years to the date of that incident. It was just 1 week shy of the 5th year anniversary. And in that 5 years, my father and I worked so hard and consistently to be in each other's lives in a positive way and to show each other and to demonstrate to each other that we loved each other deeply. And I know that when my father died, he knew that I loved him.
And
He
you also
knew
knew,
that
yeah,
I knew that he loved me. So he was able to die knowing that I loved him.
and both
And
of you knew that you were not cowards.
exactly that. And believe me, those 5 years were not, oh, tulips and daffodils. There were some trying times where, again, we tested each other and each of us found the line as to where we could cross with each other. But I am so fortunate to have gone through that incident, to be able to have had those last 5 years with him, to rebuild and let him know that I do love him, and I know that he loved me.
Yes, and part of that fortune is the fact that you survived the most serious suicide attempt a person can have and still survive. That survival resulted in a complete change in your perception of what happened when you were 17 and what actually happened when you were in your 50s. Instead of it being a recreation, it was an opportunity for a reframing. I think that was the word that you used.
Yeah.
Of the experience, so that you could see yourselves more as heroes than as cowards.
And I think that right there is it. You helped me see that, my dad had issues of his own cowardice that certainly dogged him throughout his life, from his seminal event that happened when he was 19 years old, when he ran away from a horde of invading Chinese during the Korean War, and him thinking himself a coward when all he wanted to be growing up was a army man. And in his moment of, greatest trial, he ran away. But yet you were able to help me see that, well, he didn't run away. He turned around and ran back up that hill and grabbed that machine gun so that it wouldn't fall into enemy hands. So he was, in fact, a hero, despite that maybe in his own mind, he was less than a man for a better part of his life.
And feeling like he was less than a man probably gave him the idea that he'd better be more of a man with you and really come down hard on his 17-year-old son who was coming home late, so that he could teach you the lesson you needed to learn so you wouldn't become a coward like him. All of which was basically a bullshit belief system that he had created for himself, a meaning of life, which in fact was a negative meaning and had very little connection to what really happened.
And, as I look at the last years of his life, how much pain that he was in because he had some physical ailments and things like that, and how he was trying to be brave, to soldier through, the pain, and how I would just give him some CBD, and how it would help alleviate the pain, and how grateful he was just for that. But yet how he wouldn't take such a simple, proactive measure to relieve that pain himself.
Yeah, it's true that an awful lot of people who have come to see me over the years have felt like they deserved pain. Felt like pain was some sort of divine punishment that came to them for some horrible construct they had formed of previous experiences. And it's very interesting because the reframing of the pain, the reframing of the experiences often helps people to see themselves in a different light and to accept that what there is something that can be helped by just looking at it differently, by just learning how to think about it differently. And, I personally have had a few very difficult experiences. It surprises me that I'm still alive at 77, because it looks to me like there are at least a dozen times when most anybody else would have died in experiencing what I experienced.
Wow.
At the same time, I do believe in God, partly because of this. My God is someone who forgives, who understands, and who helps me to change how I think about things so that I can help others, and that helps me.
Mm. Well, and what I thought was really interesting, I was just thinking about this as I was preparing for today's podcast here. It wasn't long after that, you and I had this sort of breakthrough with this about the realization of my father and how I was able to help heal him.
Mm-hmm.
That, if you recall, I had seen my father. For those who were watching, just a few days after Neil and I had one of our final sessions, I saw my father. It was at a distance, but it was for a good 3 seconds. He was driving in a car, and I had to do a double take to just make sure that it wasn't my mind playing tricks on me. But I saw my father, and I as I look back and in preparing for this, that was like sort of an aha for me. It's like, oh my God, I saw my dad not long after you and I had our final session, where we sort of kind of nutshelled this together, that I was able to help heal him at the same time. And as I look back at that now, I see that as a wonderful confirmation from him, that he wanted to appear to me and to let me know that it's okay. And as a symbol, he was in a car, and so that he's moving on, that maybe he's moving on to the next stage for him. Mm-hmm. And that was sort of maybe our goodbye.
Mm-hmm. Sure. And whether what you saw was real or a projection or a hallucination or whatever and other people want to project onto it, the truth is that it was the closure that was needed to deal with really the only unresolved major issue in your life. And you have spent most of your life thinking of yourself more as a loser and a coward than as a winner and a hero. And by virtue of your having been father to your father, by virtue of your having understood what happened to him and applied it to yourself and seen your contribution to his healing, you are now, at least in my best fantasy, done with any past therapeutic process and ready to get on with your life as the winner that you are.
Wonderful. Not sure what format that's going to take. I can say that I'm in a really great place right now, where I am actualized by doing something 180 degrees different than I ever thought I would want to do, which I'm now doing locksmithing, which is just something that 5 years ago never would have been in my realm of, possibility or desire. So here I am in 2022, excited about what is coming next. And even if it's not anything next, to just actually be able to relax in the now. I was just sitting here, preparing for today's podcast, and just looking around and realizing how content I am with things that they are in the now, and how I actually don't really want to change anything, because the now is really good.
It's all there is. And I can testify to your competence as a locksmith since you opened a file cabinet of mine that I couldn't open before. And the experience of the present is all there is. But it can only be truly appreciated when you have the now in its proper context, taking into account the past. When the past contributes to your existing in the now without some sort of self-talk of how you screwed up in the past and how you need to, you don't deserve to enjoy the comforts and the experience of now. We've talked about this before, but nobody gets out of life alive. The issue is, how do you get through this moment in a way which you can say to yourself, I did the best I could. And if you feel in retrospect you didn't do as well as you could, how can I change so that the next time something like this comes up, I can feel I grew rather than shriveled?
And I think our work has really helped me be a little bit nicer to myself, to be willing to give myself a break and to not be so hard on myself that, like you said, oh, I'm a loser, or oh, you're an idiot for doing that, because that self-talk, of course, is what can keep you down.
This is the
Psychology Today. Forgive yourself.
That came out this month, and it's an extraordinarily important concept to be able to forgive yourself, to be able to accept yourself as you are. It's taken me a long time. In fact, I tweeted today about the fact that I see myself as an idiot savant. I'm very good at knowing how people think and at changing that thinking so they can think in ways that are more constructive and positive for themselves. But if you ask me to figure out how to get this chair through that door, I can't do it.
Yeah.
I'm a thought engineer. I'm not an engineer that has to do with things. So the idiot part of me has been there my whole life. Fortunately, I think I've been able to develop the thought engineer part of me to the point where I can help a lot of people.
I love that framing, thought engineer. And to that end, you're in my brain. And we've talked about that a lot, that the self-talk I have now in my brain is actually talking to you. And I find that I'm pretty content. And one of the things that I say to myself a lot is that I'm doing the best I can with what I have.
Good.
And that's sort of my way to forgive myself if I don't, do whatever in a way that, maybe I'm self-disappointing. No, I'm doing the best I can with what I have, and it's going to be whatever it's going to be, and I'm okay with it because I'm okay with myself.
That's wonderful. And if you really look at in depth at any behavior, anything we do, it's a compromise. It's a compromise between forces which are pushing us towards doing something that would be worse, and forces that are pushing us toward doing something that would be, in our minds, better. And when you understand what those forces are, you can move yourself toward the better. I find that examining the negative forces, which we've done in these podcasts, I mean, it can't get much more negative force than a person who so seriously tries to kill himself than you did, who wakes up really unhappy that he didn't succeed in killing himself, really pissed off at himself because he didn't, and who is now turned into the person that you're presenting to the world right now. There's no better way to understand how getting into the negative at sufficient depth and with the proper help can help you to become more positive and more of a person who understands life as it really is.
And that again is what I feel so great about the podcast series, in a sense, is that we have, particularly in the last several episodes, we've been trying to detail how your thoughts inform your perceptions, which then dictate your reality. So it's really important to be careful how you think of something and to in my case, not always dwell on the negative, because you can always find it, but actually to really consciously look at the positive and to be in the now. And it's like, as I look around me, even just here now, I look at what I have surrounded myself with of shape and size and color and texture and composite, even just, looking here behind you.
Mhm.
So I see abundance now wherever I look. And that is what the world now is presenting to me,
Mhm.
because I'm making that conscious decision to see this abundance and to
Yeah.
train
And
my mind to focus on the abundance rather than to uh, concentrate on a perceived lack, which isn't there. It only exists in my mind.
exactly.
And what is
And
really here in front of
it's
me
not
is
a
abundance.
Pollyannish type of thing. It's not a, I'm thinking, I'm going to ignore the negative and just accentuate the positive. I remember a joke about a meeting in heaven between Norman Vincent Peale and Immanuel Kant. Norman Vincent Peale, the guy who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking, and Immanuel Kant, the great philosopher. And Immanuel Kant comes out in flowing black robes and holds out his hand and says, Immanuel Kant. And Norman Vincent Peale says, oh, yes, you can, Immanuel, just put your mind to it.
I love it. Oh, what a great way to end our series. Your final thoughts on our podcast series here.
My final thought is one of appreciation for you. I have spent my entire professional life with audiences of one or maybe two or three, a family, and everything that I do is only available to the audience I'm talking to. What people say about what happened is up to them. I'm not into bragging about my competence, except maybe in my tweets. The bottom line on it, though, is that you've given me an opportunity to demonstrate to the world who I am and what I do, and this allows me to, in a sense, die happy, even though, for all I know, I am healthy and I may live another 10 or 20 years.